So, what if the greatest scientific mind of a generation started out as the slow kid? Today, we're going to dive into the story of Albert Einstein. I mean, his name is literally synonymous with genius, but his journey began in the most unlikely way imaginable. Just think about that for a second. It's a question that sounds almost impossible, right? How does a child who had trouble even speaking, a kid who was kind of overlooked, grow up to completely redefine how we see space, time, the whole universe? Well, let's find out. To really understand the genius, we've got to go all the way back to the boy. And his story, it didn't start with some flash of brilliance. It started with a quiet, really observant childhood. Yeah, his early years were, well, they were a challenge. He didn't really start talking until he was about 4, which, made some people worry. But then, a simple gift from his dad, a compass, changed everything. That invisible force, the one that always made the needle point north, it sparked a lifelong obsession with the unseen rules that run our universe. This deep curiosity, it put him on a collision course with his own education. He just hated the rigid school system, all about memorizing facts. He wasn't interested in just knowing things. He had this burning need to understand why they worked the way they did. So it's not a huge surprise that after he graduated, he struggled. He got rejected from teaching jobs left and right and ended up taking what seemed like a major step down, a job as a patent clerk. But here's the thing. Nobody knew that this quiet little office was about to become the epicenter of a scientific earthquake. See, being free from all the stuffy rules of academia wasn't a bad thing. That patent office, it turned out to be the perfect incubator for his world-changing ideas. Okay, picture this. The year is 1905. While he's working his 9 to 5, this 26-year-old Einstein publishes 4 papers that just completely detonate the foundations of physics. It's now known as his annus mirabilis, his miracle year. In that single year, he introduces his theory of special relativity, this totally mind-bending idea that space and time aren't fixed but actually change depending on who's looking. Oh, and he also casually drops the most famous equation in history, E equals mc squared. With just these ideas, he completely rewrote the book on how the cosmos works. So what does that elegant little equation actually mean? Well, it tells us that energy and mass are basically interchangeable. They're just two sides of the same coin. A tiny, tiny bit of mass can be turned into a massive amount of energy. That one simple idea unlocks everything from how the sun burns to the power of an atom bomb. His breakthroughs, of course, brought him global fame and tons of respect. But they also came with this really heavy burden, a complication that would follow him for the rest of his life. The world finally caught up to his genius. In 1921, he got the highest honor in science, the Nobel Prize in Physics. It pretty much cemented his status as a global icon. But here's a little bit of trivia for you. You'd assume the prize was for his most famous work, the theory of relativity, right? I mean, that makes sense. Actually, no. The Nobel Committee was still a little hesitant about relativity, so they gave him the prize for explaining something called the photoelectric effect. This was his revolutionary idea that light can act like a particle, not just a wave, a concept that became a cornerstone of quantum mechanics. It just shows you how wide-ranging his genius really was. And this is where his legacy gets tragically complicated. On one hand, you have the glory of the Nobel Prize. On the other, a deep, profound regret. Because he was afraid the Nazis would build an atomic weapon, he signed a letter to the US president, a letter that helped kickstart the Manhattan Project. Seeing the incredible, destructive power that came from his own discoveries, it just horrified him. He would later call signing that letter the one great mistake of his life. He spent his final years as a passionate, outspoken advocate for world peace and getting rid of nuclear weapons. So after this incredible life of amazing highs and devastating lows, what's the ultimate lesson we can take away from the whole Einstein paradox? The answer really comes from Einstein himself. He often said he didn't have any special talent. He was just passionately curious. He believed his greatest gift wasn't some superior brain, but the fact that he never, ever stopped asking questions like a child. And that brings us full circle, doesn't it? The story doesn't start with a genius. It starts with a quiet boy, just mesmerized by the invisible force moving a compass needle. That simple act of wondering, of just asking why, that's what put him on the path to change the world forever.
In the end, Einstein's story teaches us that our potential isn't really measured by how fast we learn, but by how deeply we wonder. And that leaves all of us with a pretty powerful question to think about.